screen?
Yes.
Lovely. Okay, thanks.
And the recording has started. Thank you, Miranda. So without further ado, I will hand over to Miranda to kick us off on web content and first contact.
Thanks, Yeti.
Okay, I think this is actually Sarah, but I can speak if you
Oh,
prefer.
sorry. No, it is. It's me.
Apologies.
I'm looking
sorry, Sarah.
blankly at my screen, just waiting for Miranda to talk, and it's me. Sorry, everybody. So on the user research side this sprint, we've transcribed the user research interviews that myself and Rob undertook with some temporary accommodation residents at the beginning and the middle of August. They've been very, very interesting. I think I spoke about these at the last sprint. So it was just going through the transcribing and just getting the key points from that. And with the next thing, we've also been looking at the planning and the logistics of running some user research interviews at the hostels. So I've spoken to Karen over at Redbridge Hostel, Redbridge Foyer, sorry, and we're looking at doing some user research interviews on a face-to-face basis with some temporary accommodation residents as part of a follow-on from the initial user research that we've done. Over to Miranda.
Oh, thanks, Sarah.
Thank
I'm
you.
covering this slide for Aishan, who's on leave. She's been gaining insights from our frontline customer service channels to build up a picture of the housing issues our service users feel strongly about. So this will cover queries for all housing teams, so not just housing needs. We're including social media, customer service queries and complaints. And we can glean pain points into the user journeys from our interactions on social, for example. Last week, we had a frustrated resident. She was venting on Facebook. They had an issue as they wanted a bid for a property, but had a problem with one of the forms on the website. After doing a bit of investigation, the form she had a problem with was actually the one to join the housing register, which isn't a Redbridge website. The customer couldn't get through to us on the phone, so she turned to Facebook. She wasn't even on the bidding website, so there was a disconnect here in the journey and the query. Aishan's collecting these types of insights into a report, and yeah, hopefully that will build up a really good picture of our customers. Next slide. So in terms of the wider web content project, that's work that will eventually cover all housing content and other Redbridge website content. We're looking at establishing GDS agile content design processes for this particular alpha project. Just to go through this. So any content requests, they start in the backlog, and these requests are prioritized usually in refinement sessions. Second part of the process is we draft the content. We only draft what's essential to meet the user need. Then we go to something called 2i, which is peer review with another content designer. I'm not sure what 2i means. It's something that GDS invented. I mean, Katrina might know, but I don't know what it means.
It's basically second pair of eyes. So it's just a second pair of eyes on content. So
cool, thank you. Oh, I get it now. 2i, as in 2 eyes. Yeah. Then we'd make some amends from 2i unless there's any major problems, in which case we'd go back to drafting the content. Then the content gets fact-checked by a subject matter expert with ideally a 5-day turnaround. Then we make the amends, then it's second 2i, we publish the content, and then we'd review the content performance. This could include stuff like usability testing the content with end users. So that's a very quick run through of the process. Next slide. So recap on our methodology for creating the content as we've started to look at duty to refer and homelessness and rough sleepers. Going back to the second step in the GDS framework, which is draft only what's essential to meet the need. We started with qual and quant research. So for example, research interviews, queries with customer services, Google Analytics. And then we looked at understanding the actual service processes and the customer journeys. So, for example, what actually happens when someone contacts us because they're homeless? You know, what do? We then look at the existing content, identify the user needs and the acceptance criteria for the content, and then we write the copy so it meets readability standards. So, for example, the last show and tell, I mentioned the very useful but slightly flawed Hemingway app. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, thanks, Sarah. So completed for this sprint in terms of content design, we reviewed the current homelessness and rough sleepers web content. We identified that we actually need 4 pages, 4 separate pages to meet the user needs and the acceptance criteria. And that is support for rough sleepers, homelessness or risk of homelessness support, support for facing eviction, and the Redbridge homelessness strategy. We've written the first drafts and they're currently at the initial 2i stage with the content consultant for peer review. Next slide. So in terms of web content stream, activities for the wider web content stream, which covers content for the other housing teams, includes the content audit and Google Analytics for housing management and asset management. And I believe Katrina is going to talk about that on the next slide.
Thank you. So yes, this is part of kind of broader work. It helps inform what we've been doing, and particularly the content audit that I was doing around housing needs. So it provides validation for that, but also kind of sets up future work as well. So looked at the council tenant and leaseholder pages and found some similar things that we're finding with the housing needs specific content. So views proportionately very low, and for these pages quite low among all housing pages. So even the top council tenant leaseholder pages were only 10% of the main housing landing page. The main route into content is actually via the My Redbridge account or Google, rather than browsing or traveling through the website. And that's kind of also, a factor with the broadly with the website content, where many of your users are new users and the returning users tend to be the ones who are using My Redbridge. So that means it's kind of flagging up a sense of fractured journeys across the website and across housing content, and particularly housing needs content. And that's also, another strand to that is there's high time and page and a high bounce rate. So people are coming in and looking very specifically and then leaving the website, and that's on key content. So that's again fractured user journeys, and ideally these are journeys where we'd expect people to look at more than one piece of content perhaps. Key tasks are basically logging into their My Redbridge account, looking at repairs, improvements, looking at right to buy and about rent. Right to buy is also a term that surfaces quite highly using Google Trends and to the public, like generally. And the content pages are really long and use a lot of complex language and fail readability and accessibility standards. And we know that's important, even looking at the DataGov demographics data from going back to 2011, 2015, because, 10% of households across Redbridge Borough, English is not the first language of anyone in the household. Individual wards, that might be up to 25% of households. Nearly 1 in 5 households have no qualifications, and around 1/3 of people living in Redbridge are not of working age. They may be older people. 1 in 8 of people in Redbridge might be over 65. So that makes it all the more important for the content to be really accessible and really readable. So that's good. That's opportunities to improve, and hopefully that'll basically feed back into the work that I'll be doing next on content plan for actual housing needs content. And I will hand back to Sarah. Thanks,
Katrina. So completed this sprint on the access to digital. This is a new thing that we've added. We've been gifted 20 reconditioned laptops from Interquest, which is one of our training providers, and these are going to be used as part of the access to digital pathway. Again, this was part of the discussion that I had with, I had a quick call with Sasha, and I caught up with Karen Walsh on Friday. And we want to make these laptops available to residents within the hostels, within the foyer, Redbridge foyer, so they can access for any sort of work, social needs, anything like that. At the moment, these reconditioned laptops are completely clean, so they've got no software or anything on them. So I'm currently researching support for licenses and access to software and support. They won't be supported by ourselves at all, so we are looking to get some support from somewhere, but that's in hand. The proposed activity for next spring on the research side, we're looking to secure some interviews at the hostels week commencing the 12th of September with residents. And again, this is what I alluded to earlier on in the discussion. We're hoping to speak to quite a few, between 8 and 10 residents within temporary accommodation during that week on a face-to-face basis. We've found that doing research on a face-to-face basis, we get a lot more engagement, and so yeah, this is what we're looking to do, spend a couple of days down at the hostel and at Redbridge for you. I think, Miranda, you're going to be meeting with the Housing Resident Engagement Officer to go through the combined research efforts. I don't know if you want to say anything about that here.
Yeah, so Kerry, I think she started quite recently. She's actually doing an engagement piece with the council tenants and leaseholders. So we're looking into tapping into that as well for our wider web content project. That meeting's next week. Yeah, Aishan's going to be continuing with collating the frontline service queries as well as part of the research. And next slide. So for proposed activity for next sprint in terms of content, we're going to progress the duty to refer content and the homelessness and rough sleepers content through the process, which I talked about earlier on. We're setting up the content using some content user needs workshops with stakeholders. And Katrina is also going to be creating the first draft of the content plan for housing needs and also working on the first draft of content strategy for the Redbridge website. I don't know if you wanted to say a little bit more about that, Katrina, or if that's enough.
No, thank you. I'll just say so that's based, so it's a first draft because we have albeit that we may not have all the user research and insights that we would ideally like, we've got enough combined with analytics to be able to do a first pass and be able to establish definitely some high level user needs that we can then move into trying to validate and start to address priority content as well, in the way that we've been doing with doing some prototype rough sleeper and homelessness content. Thank you.
Thanks, Katrina. So for proposed activity for the next sprint for the access to digital, this is just following on from what I was talking about in relation to the reconditioned laptops. I'm in discussion with Lottie, which is a London Office for Technology and Innovation. They work with a lot of London boroughs and organisations to support, to offer support and software for residents and for teams and organisations. So I've been in touch with them. I'm just waiting for them to get back to me in relation to perhaps offering some advice or even providing some software or any budget that we can perhaps use, any funding that we can perhaps tap into for these gifted laptops. And I'm in discussion with Work Redbridge as well for the same, just to see if there's anything that we can get or we can work together with Work Redbridge. So moving on to the rough sleeper pathway. This spring, we completed the rough sleepers service design scoping, which is part of the commissioning piece. So we've got the full scope for the commission. We've worked on that. We've started pulling all of that together. We've also reviewed the developing support for single homeless, which was developed in January this year, and we received not long ago. So yeah, that was a really, really good piece of work, and we've consolidated that into some of the service design scoping as well. And we're confirming a shared protocol with partners in relation to the web content. So that means that we're going to be speaking to partners, so people at the Welcome Centre, at SHP, at Westminster Drug Project and Project Malachi, as well as within the adult social care and community teams just to talk about the web content to make sure that everything is aligned together. So we've got that sharing protocol in place now. Our proposed activities for next sprint, and our next sprint starts on Wednesday. So we're looking at finishing off. We've got a rough sleeper protocol planning meeting with communities and partners. So we had an initial meeting on Friday last week. Sorry, it was Bank Holiday Monday. I can't remember what day it is. On Friday last week with the community teams and some of our partners to look at the rough sleeper protocol. So we want to get that further developed. We want to finalise the rough sleeper commissioning procurement paper as well, which will then go to the head of housing needs for check-in and for sign-off and approval. And we want to share the proposed content with partners, and that's the partners that I've just been talking about that have got the protocol in place, the sharing protocol. So we'll be sharing with Single Homeless Project, Welcome Centre, Westminster Drug Project, to make sure that the content that we're designing is exactly what they need and exactly what is suitable for rough sleepers and for the homeless. And that's it. That brings us to the end of our show and tell for this sprint 7. I'm going to stop sharing now, but if there's any questions, please shout up.
Shall I stop recording?
Yes, please, Miranda.
Okay.